Hello, welcome to the Nature's Nexus podcast. Here, we're all about connecting anyone and everyone with our environment. We'll aim to do this through sharing knowledge and discussing various topics that show people how they can be better connected to nature and the world we live in. At the end of each episode, we'll also provide some actionable steps that anybody can take to help make our world a better place. I believe that the impact of everyday people can be profound if we all act and strive to leave the world in a better way than we found it, especially our environment. We'll try to keep things enlightening, informative and educational, whilst not getting too heavy on the info and topics presented. I'd love anyone and everyone to be able to listen and enjoy tuning in. I hope we can be the nexus between you and the beautiful world we live in and so rely on. This is Jessica York bringing you another episode of Nature's Nexus. Let's go. Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of the Nature's Nexus podcast. Today we're going to continue our discussion on sustainability. As we started our discussion, I think it was a couple of episodes ago when I had Tamara on talking about sustainable consumerism. And today we have a guest, Dr. Sue Elliott, who's going to talk to us about sustainability education in early childhood. So I reached out to the Sustainable Living Armidale group on Facebook because I thought, they might have a good contact who was relevant and might come onto the podcast to talk to us about what they do and continue that conversation on sustainable living. And the Facebook group responded with contact details for Sue. So after reaching out to Sue and getting her positive response, I realised I've come across a bit of a gem in sustainability, as Sue has a wealth of knowledge in early childhood education in sustainability. So let me introduce Sue to you all. Dr. Sue Elliott is an adjunct senior lecturer in early childhood education at the University of New England here in Armidale, New South Wales, and is a visiting scholar at the University of Cincinnati, Ohio in the USA. Sue is a long-term early childhood education for sustainability advocate, researcher and author. She convenes the Transnational Dialogues in Early Childhood Education for Sustainability Research Group, and in 2023, Sue was acknowledged as a Fellow of the Australian Association of Environmental Education. She is co-editor of Young Children and the Environment, 3rd edition, by Davis and Elliott, published in 2024, and is also co-author of Early Childhood Australia Essentials, Sustainability in Early Childhood, also by Elliott and Davis, published in 2023. Sue is also a consulting editor for the International Journal of Early Childhood Environmental Education, associate editor for Children, Youth and Environment, and has coordinated various childhood consulting projects, including the New South Wales Office of Environment and Heritage Review of Early Childhood Education for Sustainability in New South Wales back in 2016. Sue has presented many keynotes and workshops with educators both nationally and internationally. Her main interests are outdoor play spaces, nature play programs, and education for sustainability in early childhood settings. Healthy, sustainable futures for young children drive her work across the early childhood education sector. So welcome, Sue. That's quite a wealth of knowledge and experience that you've got there that you brought with you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Okay. Thanks, Jessica. Thank you for the welcome and thank you for having me in this podcast today.
Oh, my pleasure. So we'll start off with a couple of questions that I just ask all the guests when they come on the podcast, which are just a couple of basic questions I like to ask everybody. And the first one is, what is it that you love most about our natural world?
Our natural world gives me a sense of being restored. So I find it a very restorative space to be in. And also I think it's a dynamic space. There's always something different, something to provoke your interest or to be curious about in the natural world. It's always changing.
Yes, for sure. There's a lot of stimulus out there. Yeah. Awesome. And the second one is, how do you get connected to nature, or when do you feel the most connected to nature?
Well, living in Armidale, having lived most of my life in Melbourne, I find walking out the front door connects me to nature because I can actually see the horizon and the trees. I'm a very keen, productive gardener, and I do actually like being out in the bush. I spent much of my childhood in Victoria in the mountains in the northeast of Victoria.
Yep.
So mountains, for many people would say the beach is their place to go, but for me it's the mountains, and Armidale fits that really well.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah.
Gums.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is quite similar up here to down there in ways. Yeah, lovely. Awesome. Okay, well, to start the session off, I thought that maybe we'd delve into a bit of background an inspiration on the topic, which is sort of brings me to, you know, what inspired you to focus on sustainability in early childhood education?
Well, actually, Jessica, that takes me back quite a few years. I've been in this game for a while, and I have to go back to about the 1990s. And at that stage, I had early childhood qualifications, and I'd also done a master's in science. And there was a lot happening in environmental education in schools, but there was very little happening in the early childhood sector. And I was attending conferences with the Australian Association for Environmental Education, which was mentioned before. And they had a lecture there on deep ecology.
Yeah, okay.
And it suddenly rang alarm bells for me and connected everything in terms of the science that I'd learnt, my connection with children, and what deep ecology meant in terms of our interconnections between humans and the natural environment.
Yeah.
And knowing that there was a lot happening in the school sector and a lot of funding, but nothing happening in early childhood, that's when I started. And I can remember feeling a bit, there was a bit of fear and intrepidation because I wrote my first little article in a professional journal thinking this is going to be the end of me. But in fact, it was the beginning, and here I am, you know, over 30 years later, still doing this work.
So you really saw a gap there. Yeah, it was your fair bite. Yeah. And what sort of maybe define what is early childhood? Is there a bit of an age range there that you sort of stick to?
Well, generally speaking, we talk about early childhood education in Australia as being birth to 5 years of age. So that's across family daycare, childcare centre, preschool settings. The names do change across Australia, so you've got to be careful what you say. And if you use the term early years, that would be from birth up to 8, so including the early years of school. So I'm particularly talking about early childhood education, birth to 5.
Yeah. So quite young.
Yeah.
So what is the history of early childhood education for sustainability in Australia?
Well, it started in the 1980s, 1990s. I had another colleague, Julie Davis, that I have worked with extensively in Queensland, and she was starting about the same time in Queensland. And we also connected with someone in the United States, Ruth Wilson. She was starting doing work in that area in the US around that time too.
Yeah.
So, you know, we started quite small, and what we did in Victoria in particular was to begin a network of educators in early childhood that were interested in the environment and in sustainability. And we started off in very practical ways, like we'd sit around making rope dolls out of rope and leftover wool, or we'd make gravel bags for children because in those days they used to be full of wheat or rice, and that's food, so we don't want to waste food, so we were using aquarium gravel.
Oh, okay.
So there were really practical things, or how to set up a compost in an early childhood centre, alternative cleaning products, how to use waste materials and repurpose them in different ways for children rather than purchasing everything from a store. So that's really where we started with the network in Victoria. And we now currently have 6 state-based networks across Australia.
Wow.
And together they actually form an alliance. And the alliance had a conference in October last year that was very well attended. And the alliance is now running webinars and learning circles to support educators in developing early childhood education for sustainability. So that's in Australia, but there's also been a parallel thing going on overseas as Julie and myself have been doing more work and connecting with colleagues internationally. That's where we have the Transnational Dialogues for Research, which is a group that Julie began in 2010, and I'm currently a co-convener of that group.
Yeah.
We have over 170 people on our international mailing list.
Well, so you've really started something.
Yeah. So it's just...
So do you think that you've started, like it sounds like you've really started this in Australia. Do you think that you sort of started it overseas, or it was already there and you're just helping bolster it?
I think Australia is one of the leading countries. I was actually going to mention later when we did a systematic review last year of the literature, there are 3 top countries in the research, and that's Sweden, Australia and Turkey.
Wow.
So Australia has been up there at the forefront of this sort of work for many years now.
Yeah. Awesome. That's amazing. So where are you guys currently up to? What's happening now with Australia for early childhood education for sustainability?
Well, we've had a very big milestone recently. It's been a long time coming, but we now have a sustainability principle in the early years learning framework. So the curriculum for early childhood now has a principle around sustainability. And we've been advocating for that for a long time, and it became mandated from the beginning of 2024.
Yeah.
So what's happening now is all those networks that I mentioned before and the Alliance are now stepping up to try and support educators in implementing that principle.
Yeah.
There are some examples, certainly in the curriculum framework document, but there's a lot more for educators to understand about sustainability than in the framework document. So, I thought I was finishing my career, but in fact, with the new principle and the need for workshops and professional learning and more publications, there's a lot more happening.
So it being a principle, that essentially means it's now part of the curriculum being taught. Wow, that's major.
And so you can walk into an early childhood centre and say, well, this is in your curriculum document. Show me how you are engaging in sustainability with children and with families and the local community.
Yeah, because they have to, because it's part of the curriculum.
Yeah. So that's a really strong leverage point, whereas previously we didn't have that. Or we could say, well, sustainability is a big issue and we need to be doing something about it and we need to be starting in early childhood and there's much potential. But now with the curriculum document, so there's a lot more to do. I can talk about that later, but that's
it's an amazing achievement though, and now I guess it just goes upwards and onwards from there.
Well, if you compare it to the Australian curriculum, the school-based curriculum, they've had sustainability as a cross-curriculum priority for quite a number of years.
Yeah.
So it is meant to be implemented in schools, but now with it, a principle in the early childhood framework means that you can actually build continuity between what's happening before children get to school and then what happens in school.
Yeah.
Having said that, I hear from colleagues in the primary sector that it's still a bit patchy. It depends on having significant people that are going to be leaders and are actually going to work with sustainability across all the curriculum areas. You can do it, whether it's literacy or maths or science. There's potential for sustainability learning.
Yeah, all the different areas it can spread into and can be utilised in.
Yeah.
So you sort of said Australia is up there with Sweden and
Turkey.
So how are we comparing to them now? I think you said we're sort of leading.
Yeah, well, we're certainly one of the leaders, as I mentioned before. One of the interesting aspects, I've just been, in fact, it's going to the publishers tomorrow. I've been working with my colleague Eva Alman-Hagser in Sweden, and we've edited a book of international chapters.
Yeah.
So everywhere from Malta, Taiwan, Sweden, Finland, US, Australia. And we had to sort of write a conclusion for that book, having read all those chapters and edited them all. And I think the overwhelming conclusion was that there are a handful of countries where sustainability is part of the early childhood curriculum. But even in those countries where it is recognised, sometimes there are challenges around implementation.
Yeah.
There are challenges around having educators sufficiently trained. And also challenges about unpacking sustainability as a concept, that it is a multi-dimensional concept. That's the way UNESCO talks about it. And I think many people accept that it's not just about the green environmental dimension, it's also about the political, economic, cultural, social dimensions of sustainability.
Yeah.
So they're the areas that seem to be challenging for countries where they do have some early childhood curriculum document around sustainability. In other countries, they're still struggling to get it onto the agenda for early childhood.
Yeah.
So it's not many countries in the world that actually have sustainability in their curriculum.
Yeah, okay.
And they suffer a lot of fragmentation because the early childhood sector is sometimes a challenging sector to work with because it involves childcare and it involves education, and there's different local levels of government involved, and it can be quite difficult to, to cohesively move forward, I guess, is what I'm saying. There's policies at different levels.
Yeah, so I was sort of going to delve into the challenges later, but I feel like we've sort of gotten into it now. So it sounds like there are a few of the biggest challenges is getting it through the policies and through the legal systems. Yeah. So can you just sort of summarize those biggest challenges for Australia, or even, just for trying to incorporate sustainability in early childhood in general? What they are?
Well, the challenges, like I mentioned about educators and upskilling educators.
Yeah. So it sort of needs to be in there. It needs to be in their training.
In their teacher training, exactly. Yeah. So teacher training, there's a real dearth of sustainability in tertiary early childhood education courses.
Yeah. And that's almost beyond you guys. Like, that's another area altogether that needs to have it incorporated to then benefit what you're trying to do.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. The area which has made the most inroads there is in the TAFE sector, that in the national training for people that are diploma or certificate qualified. They've had a unit on sustainability in their courses since about 2012. So it's actually the people with certificate and diploma qualifications that do have some understanding of sustainability, but they're, while they're very capable educators, they're not necessarily in a lead role like a degree qualified person. And that degree qualified person coming out of a university needs to have sustainability as part of their early childhood teacher training.
Yeah. So you think it's something that they can go and, create a bit of a course for the teachers to do as part of their on-work training later?
Well, it could be. It could be. There are, like I said before, the Alliance Group in Victoria is providing webinars and learning circles.
Yeah.
And there are, Early Childhood Australia has taken some initiatives in that direction as well. Yeah. And some of the bigger childcare providers like KU in New South Wales have promoted training around sustainability. So it can happen as professional learning when you've already graduated.
Yeah.
But the real issue is to try and get it into courses.
Yeah. It sounds like you do have some traction there, though, as people are sort of recognising it more. So hopefully slowly when we get there.
I guess what you'd hope is that whatever is in the early childhood curriculum document needs to be covered in early childhood teacher training courses. Yeah. Right? Yeah. But early childhood teacher training courses, having been there, done all that work, they're fairly slow to move in terms of the university processes and accreditation processes that need to happen. You can't just sort of overnight flick a switch and suddenly, So.
Yeah, that's definitely a major challenge, but hopefully one that'll be overcome with time.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you address concerns from parents or schools that may not prioritise sustainability? So coming out the other end, not from teachers, but from the parents' point of view.
Yeah, I think that's something that, has been a challenge over time, trying to get everybody on board.
Yeah.
Because not everybody has values that align with a sustainability worldview.
Yeah.
And what I've found in the past in working with services is that you need to address it, trying to find the leverage point for each individual. I mean, you might have a parent that's, the parents might need to bring lunch every day. So you say, well, okay, if you provide a lunch every day that's prepackaged supermarket stuff, that creates a lot of waste, it's unsustainable, but also look at it from the perspective of the nutrition for children, which is really important in those years, and also look at it from the economic perspective that it costs a lot more to buy a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
So it might be a health and well-being aspect, it might be an economic aspect, or it might be a waste minimisation aspect, whatever works. Yeah. I can remember a long time ago with some centres that were trying to change over to alternative cleaning practices to reduce the chemical load for children in early childhood services. And for one staff member, while she was not interested in being sustainable at all, she was reacting, her hands were reacting in some allergy to all of the chemical cleaning agents that were being used. So she was quite happy to change over because it was a really personal health issue for her.
Yeah.
So I think it's about finding those leverage points with individuals. And not everybody's going to be, out there waving a placard saying I'm sustainable. No, just got to find
what people,
works.
different values that people do have that can help align with that value. Yeah, for sure. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about sustainability in early childhood education?
Oh, biggest misconceptions that young children are incapable.
Oh, okay.
Because
they're so young, they just wouldn't realise that's what they're
people just think, they're too young, they're not capable.
Yeah.
And there's been a big shift, over the years that I've been involved in early childhood education. We used to have a sort of developmental paradigm of, you do this at this age and you do this at this age. And, that still underpins what we do, but we've shifted since the UN Rights of the Child in 1989. We talk about, and also some of the theorising, reconceptualising of images of children, we now talk about children as being capable and competent. And they have rights to have a voice and have an opinion about their future.
Yep.
And so when you put those two things together that happened in the late 1980s, 90s, there was a big shift in thinking about children. So particularly in early childhood education for sustainability, we now talk about children as potentially being change makers and active participants in sustainability, whatever you might be doing. And I always find it fascinating being with children when you raise particular sustainability issues, like there might not be enough water for water play in a drought.
Yeah.
What can we do? How can we solve this problem?
Yeah.
So children are very creative thinkers and love to be problem solvers when you give them the opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think getting back to the question, that's a big misconception about children's ability. And I also, another misconception I think, and we've had to work hard on that in sustainability, is around we don't want to burden children with all the mistakes and the challenges of the global poly crisis that we have at the moment.
Yeah.
That we actually want to take a more positive, action-orientated approach.
Like a problem-solving
approach. So, we, some people say to me, we don't want to talk to young children about that because it's going to upset them. But we really need to take a positive, proactive approach.
Yeah. Just come with the right angle.
Yeah. And there are lots of ethical dilemmas that you can talk about with children. There was actually a master's research study that was done in Queensland, and that was talking about economic sustainability and about they talked about a homeless dog and what it might feel like to be homeless or not having enough food in the fridge. And they're quite deep, compelling, topics. Yeah. But it was really interesting how the researcher educator worked with the children through those concepts. Those children ended up creating a museum of poverty.
Wow.
To show to their parents about what they understood about social justice and economic and social sustainability.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
So young children are capable. That's my message.
And like you touched on before, they are so creative too. Like when kids are so little, they have that creative output there that probably does surprise adults who mightn't have lost that as they grew up. And
yeah.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. So maybe touching on, if we talk a bit about the role of early childhood education in sustainability. Well, actually, first, I want to check, what does a well-designed nature play space look like? I want to know this.
Okay. Can we actually go a step back before that? Yeah, because I need to just clarify this nature play and sustainability.
Yes.
Okay. I've written about this idea of a sustainability nature nexus. And then we'll get on to the play space, I promise you.
Yeah.
Right? So that often when I talk about sustainability and about young children, people default to, well, we'll do gardening with children and we'll play outside and therefore we've done sustainability. And that's that's sort of a default position that early childhood educators may often go to, because the history of early childhood education is bound up with theorists like Pestalozzi and Froebel that talked about children playing outdoors and playing in nature. And so there's this romanticised children of playing in nature that sometimes we jump onto and say, well, therefore we've done sustainability. And my take on it is that there's a lot more to education for sustainability than simply nature play.
Yeah.
We need to move beyond that. We need to talk about actions, problem solving, ethical dilemmas, and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And you can find those in natural environments, and natural environments can support some of that. But natural environments are not the be-all and end-all of doing education for sustainability. And we need educators who are pedagogically willing to engage with children beyond the sense of awe and wonder and isn't it wonderful and how many how many legs has an insect got.
Yeah.
All right, we need to go a bit.
Yeah, yes, definitely. It's almost like a category within nature or off nature. It is two separate things. Yeah. Like they link, but they're separate.
Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify that. You wanted to talk about nature play spaces?
Yeah. No, thank you for clarifying. It's definitely worth doing just so everybody's on the same page when we're talking about, early childhood sustainability and then, when you mention nature play.
Yeah. So nature play has certainly been growing in Australia and internationally. There's been a big movement over the last, particularly the last 15 years in Australia.
Yeah. Does it still link in with the early childhood sustainability though?
It does.
It's like it's a part of it.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
But it's really dependent on how those educators implement those programs as to what extent they bring sustainability to the fore in their pedagogical discussions with children.
Yeah.
So
maybe if we take a step back, so how do nature play programs, how do they link to sustainability?
They link to sustainability in terms of children are getting, sensory experiences with the natural environment. So they're not, scared of touching a leaf or something, because many children are brought up these days. This is being wary, very much indoors, very much screen-based at times, depending on the situation.
Yeah.
So those sensory elements are important. Learning about the science of the natural environment is important.
Yeah.
And there's also opportunities to learn about spatial awareness, about your own physical skills.
Yeah.
That's important in nature play spaces.
Yeah.
Being resilient as well. We all need to be resilient in the face of sustainability. So be resilient. If it starts raining and you're out doing nature play, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Or if you fall off a tree and skin your knee, what are you going to do? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And also the problem solving and responding to the dynamics of the situation, that natural environments can change quite quickly. So you need to be able to adapt and respond.
Yeah.
So all those sorts of things can be part of nature play programs, but I keep going back to that point. It's dependent on the educator.
Yeah.
If they've got a sustainability interest, then they will bring that into those discussions.
Yeah.
If I can give you one example, perhaps.
Yeah.
A colleague of mine, Robert Benson in Sydney, he's now retired, but he did a whole project where he was taking children out on a regular basis and they found a shopping trolley in a pond. So there was a whole project around that shopping trolley about what it was doing there, why it was there, how could they engage with the rest of the community or the council to responsibly deal with this waste that was in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So there are many possibilities for learning in that, and it wasn't just about, the plants and the animals.
No. So, yeah.
So, So lots of things you can learn in a natural environment that relate to sustainability.
Yeah. And starting off so many of those key skills too, like your problem solving, adaptive to changing situations, all those things that will benefit kids later on as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Awesome.
So we still want to talk about nature play spaces?
Oh, yeah, I think it would be fun. I'm not super familiar. I mean, like you said, just go outside and play. But, since people can design nature play spaces, what do they sort of look like?
Well, it's a good question, and it's one that I've actually discussed with my colleague, Professor Victoria Carr in Cincinnati Uni, because we were together looking at play spaces in the US last year. And we'd come across these play spaces that were advertised as nature play spaces, but majority of the equipment was actually manufactured and produced.
Yeah.
And, it might have been rubber or it might have been
So just call it steel classic, what do they call it? They call it just classic play equipment, gym. Yeah. And they have a playground.
Yeah. So there's and there's an interesting paper about that recently about, well, how do we define what is a nature play space? And I don't think there's one definition, but it's about that balance. If you're going to design a play space, say for a public playground, then it needs to have a balance of those natural elements and those manufactured elements. I mean, most children are going to look for a swing or a slide or something like that that's manufactured.
Yeah.
But it's really important to weave those natural elements in so that they become affordances for children to climb or to engage in imaginative play or whatever it might be. So it might be rock stepping stones, it might be a log to balance along.
Yeah.
It might be some logs made into like a cubby space.
Oh yeah.
There are lots of possibilities, but how you design and balance those two elements together is really important. And I guess my big concern is the amount of wet pour rubber that's in playgrounds, because it does heat up. There's been studies on that, and if you have an ambient temperature of about 30, then the temperature of the rubber can be around 80 degrees.
Wow.
And so children are getting burnt, or you'll see signs in playgrounds, don't use this playground.
Yeah. And of course they're going to fall over, so that's when they're going to, their knees or hands will hit the hot matting. Yeah.
So tan bark is a better option for softball, but other people would say there's too much maintenance involved with tan bark. So yeah. And there's also the issue of microplastics. The Australian Microplastics Association has looked at the amount of microplastics that come off softball rubber, and how that migrates into waterways.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can go off on all sorts of tangents.
I'm sure there's a lot to it. It's a very big topic to cover, and no, that's fine. So maybe talking more about the role of early childhood education in sustainability. Why is it all important? Why is it important to introduce sustainability concepts to children at a young age? I mean, I feel like there's a very obvious answer, but maybe you'll elaborate and there's a bit more to it.
Well, I think, early childhood is one of those periods in life of exponential growth, of understanding the world and how the world works.
Just taking it all in, so much learning.
And if those aspects of sustainability can be in children's daily environment with their families, their peers, their educators, then it's such that sustainability becomes the norm. This is the way we do things. And young children are formulating their ideas about how the world works, their worldviews, what they value, what they don't value. Children do have opinions, young children do.
Yeah, they can be very opinionated. Very truthful.
If I give you one example, I hold on to this very dearly because my daughter is now in her 30s and a doctor. But when she was about 18 months old, we were washing the dishes together. And she was standing up on a chair next to me because she wanted to help Mum wash the dishes.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got to the point of washing some tin cans that we'd used some food in the tin cans. And all of a sudden in washing the dishes and putting the cans on the drying rack, she was pre-verbal at that time, but she really wanted to put her shoes on. And I had no idea why she wanted to put her shoes on. So I left the dishes, we put the shoes on. And then she came back, she got up on the chair, got the can down and put it on the floor and jumped on it.
Yeah.
because she'd seen me squashing the cans to put them in the recycling.
Yeah.
I don't know that many people these days squash their cans, but that's what we were doing as a family.
Yeah.
And so at 18 months, she was picking up on these are the sustainable practices that we engage in our household.
Yeah. Do as your parents do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So parents can be really strong and educators can be really strong role models for children.
Yeah.
And it's not just about modelling those things, but it's talking them through with children, saying, why are you doing something?
Yeah.
Why are we squashing the cans? Why are we washing them?
Yeah.
Where are they going to go next? What's going to happen after that?
Yeah. So ultimately, it's important just to start fostering that consideration of sustainability at a young age and hope that it's a value that you sort of grow with them.
I mean, one of the centres I did a project with when I was working at RMIT University, they were doing lots of things around sustainability. And when I started asking questions, they said, well, it's just what we do. It's the norm around here.
Yeah.
This is the way we do things.
Yeah.
And that's what you want for every early childhood service. It's just what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a good norm to have.
Yeah.
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 So how can educators integrate sustainability into their daily curriculum?
Yep. Many, many, many different ways.
Yeah. Are there a few that jump out at you or a main one?
Not using food as a play material.
That's to avoid the waste.
To avoid the waste and avoid presenting food as something that can be wasted by pasting, painting, or using it in a sensory tray. And
Are you thinking of like the dry pasta necklaces, things like
dry
that?
pasta, the seeds, lentils, all those sorts of things that are often used for children's play.
Yeah.
And they're still presented on Facebook, and I do my posting and say, how you thought about, because...
And for the people who don't think about it, because it's something that I remember doing it, like it's been around for a while, and like you said, it's probably just the norm. Yeah. But I guess it's things like that where you can ask, well, does it need to be the norm, and why can't it change? And I'm sure there's lots of other playthings that can be imaginated and they're off to do instead,
Well, things like sand and gravel and water and leaves and mud, they provide lots of or wood shavings, they provide lots of sensory possibilities for children.
Yeah.
And the food is, you're presenting it to children at, 1 minute you're saying you've got to eat it nicely and it's in your bowl at lunchtime.
Yeah.
And then another time you're putting it in a big trough and saying, well, we can put our hands in it. It doesn't matter if it falls on the floor.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And it's culturally, it can be very insensitive to be doing that. We have many people who are refugees in Australia.
Yeah.
Families that are struggling to put food on the table.
Yeah.
And then you're saying, well, here's a bowl of pasta, you can stick it all over this cardboard.
Yeah.
So there's a real concern there as well.
Yeah.
So that's a big one that keeps coming up.
Yeah.
That could be changed.
Yeah.
Centres are doing pretty well, I think, on the recycling, reuse, recycle, reduce.
Yep.
There's always more to do. I've been running waste workshops with Mid-North Coast Waste down on the coast in Coffs Harbour and Port Macquarie, and getting council on board, local services that deal with waste to actually support early childhood services is sometimes a sticking point,
Yeah.
So that area is one that needs to be looked at more as well.
Yeah.
Something that's come in more recently, the NHMRC, which is the National Health and Medical Research Council, they put out a guideline around health and safety in early childhood services. And the guideline was recently reviewed. It hadn't been reviewed for 10 years. And that advises educators about things like nappy changing and hygiene practices around children and cleaning. Right. And, of course, in early childhood services, we use a lot of disposable gloves. We use a lot of disposable wipes.
Yeah, all the disposable nappies.
So for the first time, that document was actually saying to educators, look, you can do some of these things, or you can without using so many disposable items.
Yeah.
And you can change nappies, not necessarily using gloves, depending on the situation.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful. And some centres are using cloths.
Yeah.
And then they'll use cloths to clean the tables or to wipe children's hands, and then they'll be washed in the washing machine and even hung out to dry on a clothesline instead of being put in a dryer.
Yeah.
They're all sustainable practices that can happen in and around children
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah. And I feel like some people might think, oh, I won't bother doing that because, it's not going to make a difference if I do it. But it'd be good if people, just all those little things I think would make a difference, especially if you think if everybody, substituted something for something that wasn't disposable. It would just all help and all add to this, just helping with sustainability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, one more example would be in Victoria, the government has banned single-use plastics in schools and early childhood services.
Yeah.
So that's helping to reduce some of the plastics that are being used.
Yeah. And a good way to lead by example.
Yeah.
Kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And we try and encourage sustainable procurement in early childhood services when they're purchasing play materials.
Yeah.
As well.
And these things can all then go back into the home with parents trying to integrate ways to encourage sustainability at home too.
Yeah.
Just all those different things.
There's a lot of pester power that goes home from early childhood centres too.
Is there?
Yeah.
As in the carers talking to the parents about?
No, the children.
Oh, the children then feed it back to the parents to say, why do we need
They're recycling, they're emptying their water bottles onto the garden in the early childhood centre, and then they go home.
Yeah.
Mum, Dad, Grandma, why haven't we done these things at home?
Yeah.
Empty your water bottle onto the garden.
Yeah. So it's almost a reverse effect. It's not the parents trying to influence the kid, it's the kid then influencing the household.
Exactly.
Yes.
Pester power, we call it.
It's a good way to carry it on.
Yep.
Can you share any success stories or standout moments from your work with educators and young children?
Oh, what can I share? Probably the one that stands out for me is which actually combines that nature and sustainability. When I was working on the Young Children and Environment book, I needed to do some case studies for a chapter. And one of the case studies was from a children's centre in the Kinglake Ranges in Victoria. And that particular centre, they would take children out regularly into the forest there around Kinglake as a nature play program.
No.
And during drought, what the children were doing was providing water for the animals, particularly the possums they were fascinated by.
Oh, yeah. Just putting out some
ashes. And they were encouraging the local community to put out water in their homes for the possums as well. Yeah. And then there were also some concerns around old growth forest logging in those ranges, which has been going on for many, many years. And
by the government?
Yeah, by the state government in Victoria. So there was an opportunity there that the educator took up, which was for the children to do some drawings and write some letters to the state government about their concerns about the possums that they knew so well.
Yep.
And how the old growth forest logging was removing the hollows that the possums lived in the trees.
Yeah.
As you might know, the state government in Victoria has now banned old growth forest logging.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, doing
a difference.
Doing that case study, joining the dots between those experiences that children had in the natural environment, for that educator to see the opportunity for community collective action, for advocacy by the children, for the state government. I'm not sure that they necessarily did listen, but, they were part of the mix of expressing their opinion about what was going on.
Yeah.
And then it had an outcome.
Yeah.
So,
it's pretty amazing what they would think of it all once you give kids the opportunity to think about it and see if they care and anything that can come out of that.
Yeah.
They actually do value it, really. They love it. You never know what they love and what it leads to. Yeah. So moving on to the future of sustainability in early childhood education. So how do you see early childhood sustainability education evolving over, say, the next decade or however long?
Yep. Well, I think we've seen a big shift, since we started all those years ago.
Definitely.
And the shift has been from a more practical orientation, let's deal with the pragmatics of how we do sustainability with recycling, etc. And there's been a deepening of the research, I think, that has really informed the steps forward, and also looking at how can we actually facilitate change with educators. So methodologies like action research and various types of professional learning where you can support educators to make change. So I think we need to very much continue that trajectory of extending the research and providing more professional learning, and also pre-service training. That's the pre-service training that I mentioned before is the big part of the jigsaw puzzle that we need to get right. And then, of course, the other thing is having policies at every level, from the level of a centre having a sustainability principle in their philosophy statement, through to management bodies supporting sustainability as part of their policies and philosophy statement, and then and also state and federal governments making sure that sustainability is prioritised in any of the curriculum documents that are coming out. So we've got to streamline all of that before it's going to become the norm. I think
Get a real structure.
we're moving in that direction. But we've still got a fair bit to go.
But you see it all happening eventually.
Yeah, I do.
It's very encouraging. Be good. So looking forward then, what gives you hope about the future of sustainability and our relationships with the natural world? It sounds like the children do. They really do have that value come alive once you find it.
Yeah. I mean, Sunday morning I spent the morning at the market in the mall in Armidale, and we were building sort of little playhouses with cardboard, and we had black cardboard to be the solar panels on the roof. So the children were working with that, and that talking about solar panels, young children. And how many solar panels might we need, and it's going to create energy for the house. And one child made a solar powered bus, and then he added wind power as well. So these are becoming part of the language for children, and that's the sort of thing that inspires me. To see children so readily engaging. With those concepts, which are, solar and wind are very new to me. They weren't around when I was a child. But they're everyday to children these days. And electric vehicles and all sorts of things that are different that they can embrace, I think.
And they get excited about them. So then how can community involvement play a role in living sustainability and fostering like a collective connection with nature?
I think the community connection is really important, because there are often community initiatives like there are in Armidale, whether it's revegetation or electrifying Armidale. There's lots of things going on. And what needs to happen is for those community initiatives not just to necessarily connect with schools, because that's where people mostly go. I wouldn't put it in the school curriculum. But actually connect with early childhood services so that there can be mutual benefits. Because early childhood services have really strong connections with families. That's part of what we do, is having partnerships with families. So building that connection with community, with families, with children, with educators. And if you have shared initiatives that you can work on, whether it's putting solar panels on the roof of the early childhood service or putting in a water tank, developing vegetable gardens, having waste-free lunches. They're all things that can go across community and families and children.
So sort of using the community through the childcare centre sort of helps.
And there are many examples in the research of community connections that are made, and connections that are in sort of interesting places. I mean, the example I often go to is there's a centre in Victoria, Balnarring preschool, and they run a beach kindergarten program, so nature play on the beach, but they connect with a local dolphin research institute.
Oh, wow.
So there's children learning from experts about dolphins.
Yeah.
And it's the educator that's facilitated that. So that's a really strong community connection.
Yeah. And then they can sort of talk a bit more about sustainability with marine life, perhaps, and how it might affect the ocean or the dolphins, and link it back to that.
And the other strong community connection that comes through is around Indigenous worldviews and perspectives.
Yeah.
And recognising how sustainability is embedded in Indigenous cultures and learning from that as well.
Yeah.
And working with local Indigenous peoples.
Yeah. So there's lots of different community initiatives they can get around and get behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And then talking a bit more about all your work and resources that you've done, can you tell us about your books and, the key messages that you hope to get through them or that have come from them?
Look, I've written, worked or edited, co-authored quite a few publications over the years. Probably doing the research publications has been really important.
Yeah.
Working with academics around the world to develop research publications. And that's been through the transnational dialogues. So we've had 2 editions, 2014 and 2020.
Mm-hmm. What are the trans dialogues?
Well, that's a research group, an intelligent research group.
Yeah.
So
that's the name of the group. Yep.
Yeah. My colleague Julie Davis has written a publication called Young Children and the Environment, and she asked me to assist with a 3rd edition of that. So we've co-edited that together, and that came out last year.
Yeah.
And
are these sort of books that that parents would read, or are they more for curriculum building for educators?
The Young Children Environment is more for educators and for people in teacher training.
Yeah.
And it has a number of international chapters as well.
Yeah.
So, and it gives references and resources and provocations for educators and case studies that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
So that's available. There's a shorter publication that Julie and I did for Early Childhood Australia, which is more a sort of booklet size that you can get your head around sustainability. And
so it could be a good one for parents.
Less pages, parents, wider community could potentially look at that one.
Yeah. And it just talks about ideas for sustainability, does it? Yeah.
Yep. And most recently I've been working on a booklet around solar and renewables for Parents for Climate, which is a national action group. And that's why we were doing the solar playhouses in the mall on Sunday.
Yeah.
So that's a very accessible booklet for educators or for parents to find out about, well, how can we engage with young children around solar and renewables? It might be walking down the street and working out which cars are electric cars because they've got a blue triangle EV sticker on them.
Yeah.
Or where the fast charging stations are, or which houses have got solar panels on the roof.
Yeah.
So pointing those things out and talking about them with children is one thing to be doing. Yep.
Yeah. So I guess we'll just have to, if parents want the books, post a link. Are they available on a website somewhere, or where do people normally find resources if they want to get some ideas for sustainability with their childhood?
Gosh. I think mostly they're directly available from the publishers that publish them. I think some of them might be on more broader publishing book sites.
So you just have to have a Google.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That's okay. I'm sure, if people, at least people know, there are resources out there if, parents or the community or even the educators need some more ideas on sustainability initiatives with early childhood, then there are resources out there to help support that.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome. And maybe some final thoughts. If you could give any advice to educators or parents about fostering children to be sustainable citizens, what would it be?
Ooh, well, I've already talked about role modelling, but I think being critical thinkers and problem solvers is very much part of it as well.
Yeah.
But just don't accept the way things are. If we're going to change and be more sustainable, then we've got to question things and say, well, what is the best way to get from A to B? Is it walking? Is it driving a car? Is it riding my bicycle?
Yeah.
So having those conversations, I think, about some of the critical issues around sustainability, what you put in what bin, What do you grow in your garden?
Yeah. And looking at what options work for you and what's feasible.
Because every community, every family is different. I'm not going to say you must do this or you must do that, but whatever is within scope for you to do.
Yep. Yeah. No, excellent point. Okay, and that brings us to an end, but we have a question from a previous guest, so we sort of do this on every episode too. It's just a random question, but I think it actually fits really well with this episode. And she asked, what would you like to see become part of mainstream education that's not currently included? Or has that already happened?
Well, sustainability's there in the curriculum documents, the Australian curriculum and in the early years learning framework.
Yeah.
But to see the implementation fully across all schools and all early childhood services, it's certainly not mainstream yet.
Yeah, still getting there, so you still like to see more of it out there, essentially.
It's an interesting choice of term because the first publication I ever wrote with Julie was called Mainstream Not Marginal.
Yeah.
Because early childhood was very, very much marginal.
Yeah.
And wasn't considered at all. And we're almost mainstream now.
Yeah.
But not quite.
Yeah. Fair enough. Oh, well, was there anything else you felt like we should cover that we haven't discussed? Oh, I mean, it's obviously a very big topic, but I wasn't sure if there's any, main points.
No, I think we've probably covered everything, Jessica. I hope that's been informative for you.
Oh, definitely. And I hope it doesn't go over people's heads too much. I think there might have been some complicated terms in there or some foreign words for people, but, I think overall there's a message that, young children can comprehend sustainability and it's becoming a further part of the curriculum now, and there's definitely ways, parents can take it further at home or the kids bring it home to educate the parents even.
That's right.
And it's just so important to help, foster that care for sustainability and then in turn how that helps nature and
exactly
connecting everybody to the world around us. Do you have any? Oh, I like to leave it with an actionable step. So an actionable step that anybody can do, and maybe obviously it'll revolve around the topic of today, but is there anything that jumps to mind that you think anybody could do?
Perhaps not one particular step, but I'd just say make little steps often. That's a fairly common phrase in sustainability, make little steps often.
Yeah.
Incremental.
Yeah.
We can't change it overnight.
Yeah.
But we can incrementally make change.
Do you have an example?
Well, I think that's a lot of what happens in early childhood centres, that they might make one little change about they might do recycling. And then somebody gets an idea, we could do a waste-free lunch. And then somebody gets another idea, we could use alternative cleaners.
Yeah.
And then somebody says, look, let's look at where we buy our play materials and are they sustainable? And then let's stop laminating.
Yeah.
And then let's stop using rubber softball. And, it's incremental.
Yeah.
Often people write, that we're going to achieve sustainability, but it's always the destination keeps moving, if you like.
Yeah.
It's small steps often.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure who said that originally, but that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, awesome. Thank you so much for that, Sue, and thanks so much for attending. It's been lovely to have you.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica.
No worries. I hope everybody's enjoyed that episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Nature's Nexus podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and found some value in what was shared today. I look forward to presenting more knowledge and sharing ways we can connect to nature in future episodes and hope you tune in with me to listen, learn, and act. Thank you, and until next time.